I can't hear you. Can you hear me? I can't hear anything you're saying. And it says that I'm unmuted. Can you hear me though? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? And I can't hear you. This is not the best. Let's see. Okay. I can't hear you still. I can't hear you. If you guys are trying to talk to me, I can't hear you. Can you hear me yet? I'm going to try leaving the meeting.
Oh, she just left, I guess. Hold on.
Audio setting? Yours? Microphone check. How about now?
Testing? You can. No, hold on. Okay, so this, oh,
Yes?
keep talking? Yes.
Okay, perfect. Problem solved.
Awesome. All right. I guess so. All right, thank you.
Problem averted.
Yeah. Thank you.
I figured I'd try jumping out of it and then coming back in and seeing if that worked, but
Yeah,
I don't know what you guys did.
I'll show you later. Okay, so should I, okay, so I'm gonna start by sharing the screen.
Yes. So we're going to introduce Mike at the beginning, by the way, just
Okay.
so everyone, so before, if we end up needing him, it's not like weird that he's jumping in the middle, and then we'll go into like the other stuff.
Perfect. Can you see my screen?
Yep, perfectly.
Okay. So I guess I'll launch the webinar now.
Yes, we
Okay.
should. 8 minutes.
All right. Hold on. Before I do, let me just one more second.
Oh no, people are in it already.
Oh, you could see them?
No, I don't know because you're controlling it.
Oh no, there aren't people in it already. They can't join yet.
Oh wait,
Hold on.
no, I can see who's attending.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to broadcast it now.
Okay.
You see my screen, right?
I see your screen. I see you. I hear you. We
Okay.
figured it out.
I thought I was unmuted. What the heck? How's it going?
Good, you?
Good. Are you already broadcasting? Yes, you
We are broadcasting. We have a couple minutes. We have 500 participants joining us, so giving them a chance to roll in.
Fantastic.
It's exciting. So many people from all over.
That's always a good sign.
Yes. Since so many people want to know about Google right now. Okay. Okay, as people are coming on in, we see almost everyone is with us. If you want to scroll to the bottom of your screen, welcome. If you want to tell us where you're from in that chat, please let us know. Oh, wow. We have others from New Jersey. We have people from Pennsylvania, St. Louis, Maryland, Arizona, New York, LA. Wow. People from everywhere, Texas. Great. New Orleans. We got quite a few from New Jersey tuning in. British Columbia. Wow, great. Out of the country. Florida, Arizona. Ooh, even PA. Ooh, more Florida. Here we go. We are going to begin in about 5 minutes, giving everyone an opportunity to join, who signed up for today's webinar. As you're waiting, if you haven't done so already, please let us know where you're from in the chat. We'd love to know where we are, who and where we're talking to. We have more from New Jersey and New Mexico, Arizona, lots from Arizona that we have checking in with us. Oklahoma, more from Texas. We're doing great. Tennessee. California, NYC. That's not far from us here in Montvale, New Jersey. Louisiana. Okay. Great question. Would we prefer to have all panelists as attendees? Oh, Mike, thank you for answering that. We're all unmuted. Here we go.
Michelle, you might want to just repeat what you had just said. You were muted when you were talking.
My mistake. So we're going to start in about now 2 minutes. If you haven't done so already, please let us know where you're from in the chat. Okay. Okay, everyone, we're going to start in just about a minute. So welcome to our presentation. Please let us know where you're from in the chat if you haven't done so already, for those who are just joining us. Okay, so we're going to get started with today's presentation. Okay, so we're going to jump in and get started with today's presentation. Just first, welcome everyone. Welcome to Getting Started with Google Classrooms webinar. We're here to explore how to build a Google Classroom. My name is Michelle, and I am joined today by two of my colleagues, Mike and Al. We're all learning leaders with Eduscape, which is a company that works to challenge educators to rethink learning by designing solutions that inspire inquiry, creativity, and collaboration. Today's agenda is going to be the following. We're going to first learn how to build and create a Google Classroom. As we're building, we're going to discuss how to add people into the classroom, whether it's co-workers, co-teachers, or students. Then we're going to talk about building the stream, how to assign and create classwork, the grading procedure, and then we're going to end with 10 minutes dedicated to a Q&A. Our learner outcomes for today's webinar are build a Google Classroom and explore Google Classroom's features that support online instruction. Before we get started, we're going to just review the logistics of the course. So to start, any questions, you're going to notice at the bottom up panel of your screen where you have been chatting already if you haven't done so yet. There is a Q&A tab. All questions, please go to that part and ask them in there. Also, a heads up that this webinar is going to be recorded and it is going to be sent out to you in days to come. The logistics of Zoom, if you are new to Zoom, are the following. We do have, like we said, that QA button at the bottom. That's where we are going to be moderating and answering any questions you have throughout the entire presentation. Also, all mics and cameras have automatically been muted and turned off. However, the controls for this feature, for future webinars are in the bottom left. And finally, just so you know, if you haven't used it yet, we do have that chat bubble in the bottom as well. And if you haven't done so yet, please let us know where you are listening from in that chat. Just give yourself about 15 seconds or so, orient yourself with the different controls that you see on your screen. As we continue today, we want to get into the troubleshooting. If you have any issues at all as we're presenting, we want to supply you with some quick troubleshooting features. So first, if your screen decides your video is disrupted in any way, if you press Control plus F5 on your keyboard, it will refresh the browser for you. Also, please check that your speakers are not muted and that your volume is turned up so you can hear us. Also, if a poll appears, which it will later on, please provide your response by clicking, responding and clicking submit. Hitting submit lets us know your answer. Also, if you have any video troubleshooting, there is a video troubleshooting guide that you can use by clicking the information button and help. Also, since as we're rolling, there is a closed captioning feature available in the lower left-hand side of the screen. Like I said, the first thing we are going to do for this webinar is ask a quick poll. We want you to let us know how comfortable you feel using Google Classroom as an online learning platform. So you're going to see a poll either pop up or you can see it at the bottom of your screen. Let us know. Are you feeling comfortable and ready? You're excited to get into Google Classroom? Maybe you're okay, feeling a little neutral about it, or are you feeling nervous? Let us know how you're feeling about all of this before we get going. Okay, give you all another second. This is great. Okay, so let's take a look at some of your answers on that poll. It's coming that some of you are feeling a little comfortable, but a lot of us are feeling a little bit nervous or okay about the situation, and that's okay. It's okay to be nervous or feel that you're not ready yet, or even feel overwhelmed, especially with the situation that's happening. But we're here to help. Today's webinar is all about designing and showing you step-by-step instruction on how to build a Google Classroom so you can go and then do this yourself. If you choose to try and build as we're building our classroom today, go for it. However, remember, we are sharing a copy of the video with you at a later point, so you can use that as a stop and go as you're building. At the top of our screen above the Google Classroom icon, we're sharing a bit.ly webinar resource information with you. That link, if you copy that down and type it into your browser, will bring you to some resources that we put together on how to and all the integrations and G Suite features that we're going to mention in today's presentation. So now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Al, and he's going to jump in and show you how to start building with Google Classroom.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. And I just want to let you know as we are going through this that this webinar is being recorded and you will have access to it after the webinar. So if there's anything that you're caught up on or you need to revisit something, you will be able to watch the recorded video, pause it, and follow along at your pace. All right, so we are going to build a classroom from scratch, okay, assuming that we have not even started building a Google Classroom yet. So we're going to help this hypothetical teacher named Mrs. Aronson work through building one from the beginning. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go to google.com and we're going to sign in. It might prompt you to enter your credentials or it might show you your credentials. Either way is fine. Make sure to log in. And then in order to access the classroom section, I'm just going to click this waffle that's labeled Google Apps. I'm going to select classroom right there. Another way to access it, I could just type in classroom.google.com. And that's going to bring me to my landing page for my Google Classroom setup. So as you can see here, Mrs. Aronson already has 2 classes. We're going to create a third one for her.
Al, I'm just going to say one thing. If this is your first time also making a Google Classroom, you're not going to see any classes there on your landing page. It's also going to ask you at the beginning to join either as a teacher or a student. Make sure that you click the join as a teacher. Otherwise, it's going to create problems later on for you because your administrator will have to go in and change that setting.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. That's actually a really good point. So because Mrs. Aronson has already started creating her classrooms, that's why you see these 2 here. In order to create her third classroom, she's just going to click this plus sign right up here. She's going to click Create Class. Now she's going to give it a name. So this might be Mrs. Aronson's English class, for example. These other sections we could populate with information if it helps us organize our classes, but they're not necessary to fill out, and they don't do anything other than help the teacher organize their classes. So we're going to leave them blank for now. We're going to press Create. Give it a sec to create it, and it brings us right into the classroom. We're going to explore this in a second, but first I want to go back to that landing page. So now we've got our 3 classes. If we want them set up in a certain order, we could just grab it and drag and drop to wherever we want them to go. And also, let's say we already set up a class, we took a really long time, and then we wanted a carbon copy of that class because we're teaching the same course several times throughout the day. But we didn't think about that beforehand. We already created the class. We don't want to go through the whole process again. We could click this vertical ellipses and just press copy. And that's going to create a carbon copy of the class. A couple of things to know though about that. It's not going to be populated with students if this one was. So you're going to have to re-enroll those students or whatever students you want to enroll. It's also not going to publish any of the assignments you created. They're all going to be in draft mode. So you're going to have to manually publish those. All right, so let's head into the class. The first thing that both you and your students are going to see is this Stream tab. This is a great place for you to post announcements, get notifications, etc. We're going to go through that in a second. So I like this picture. It's pretty cool. But we do also have the ability to change the background if we want to, just by selecting theme. Google offers a lot of different content-specific backgrounds we could choose. Or you could upload your own photo if you want. If you went on a field trip with your students and your district policy allows you to post photos because you have permissions from parents, you can feel free to upload photos from your desktop as well. Now, let's take a look at some of the settings. First thing I want to do is I want to click this gear icon on the top right of my screen. This is going to allow me to manage my general settings for my course. You notice the first thing I see is the descriptions of the course that I was prompted to fill in when I first created the class. You can edit those here. You also have some general management tools at your disposal as well. And then probably the most important thing here that we do recommend you go through at some point is the grading, right? And how you're going to calculate your grades. But we will go over that in a minute. Another place that you're going to get notification settings, if I click this hamburger on the top left right here, these 3 lines, I'm just going to move this. Okay. At the bottom, I have more settings right here. These are specifically notification settings. So some teachers want to receive email notifications to keep up to date, and other teachers don't. This is going to give you that customization so you could choose what you're going to be notified of and what you won't be notified of. To get back to my class, I'm just going to click that hamburger again. I'm going to go back into my class. All right, so now that we have our class set up, we're going to help Ms. Aronson enroll some students. So let's head over to the People tab. This is where you're going to add students, co-teachers, and possibly if your administration has it set to allow this, you could also invite guardians and parents to the class as well. And we'll talk about what that means. Right now, I'm going to add some students. I'm going to add my colleague, Michelle. I'm going to add my other colleague, Mike. So we just invited them manually to join the class. We could do the same thing for teachers, which is right up here. It's the same icon, just next to the teachers. And I'll add somebody else. Okay. If your district has your classroom set up this way, you can invite guardians here as well. There's just a button like right here for you to add guardians. It is important to note that for privacy issues, guardians are not able to actually access the classroom. They can see this, whatever student they're tied to, they can see their submissions and their grades and that sort of thing. They're not able to access other students' grades or class roster or anything like that. So that is important to know. You also don't have to manually enroll all of your students in the class. You can have them enroll themselves. So what you would do is, if you go to the Stream tab right here, you're going to see a class code. You can click that to enlarge it. And you could just copy and paste this code and send it to your students through email or however you want to get them access to it. Then they're going to follow the same procedure you did to enroll in a class, except instead of create one, they're going to join one. So if we go back to our classes, they can click this plus sign and they can join a class. That's going to prompt them to enter that code that you sent them. So you have a couple of ways to have students enroll in your course. Okay. So now let's talk about the stream that we were talking about earlier. This is a place for notifications, for announcements. It's the first thing that you're going to see as the teacher. It's the first thing that students are going to see when they enter the classroom. So maybe Ms. Aronson wants to welcome her students to the class. So she could just type in a quick message here. Okay. So from here, if we click this chevron, she can choose to post this welcome message to all of her classrooms, to some, or just to one, whatever she prefers. She can also send this message to all of her students or select few students because she wants to differentiate the messages she wants to send her students. She can also add files. She can add files from her desktop or from her Google Drive if that's something you use. You can also add links and YouTube videos. Now, if Ms. Aronson wanted to post this now, she could, or she could click this chevron right next to post, and she could schedule publishing this post for later. Right now, we want to post it immediately, so we're just going to press post. So now all of our students are welcomed to Ms. Aronson's classroom. You're also going to get some other notifications here, such as when the teacher adds assignments and that sort of thing, to keep students in the loop with what's going on. This does act almost like a social media style feed, something that students are probably pretty familiar with. if the settings are set up properly or the way the district wants them to be set up, you can also have students respond to comments, or even you can respond to comments. Let's give it a shot. There we go. See, we actually have a student, Michelle, who just said hi, everyone. And we'll say hi back. All right. One more thing I want to mention is right over here, we have an upcoming little section. This is going to inform students of any deadlines that are coming up that they might have otherwise missed. Okay. So I mentioned before that we want to set up the grading system before we actually create our assignments. So let's go back into this gear, and we're going to do that now. There are a few ways we could set up our grading system. It defaults to no overall grade. What that means is that you can still assign assignments and you can still grade students. Those grades just aren't going to be averaged out and show an overall grade. This is probably something you're going to want to use if you're using another platform for your grading, like Genesis or Schoology or Blackboard or something along those lines. If you are using Classroom as your place to actually manage student grades, you have a couple of other options. You could choose total points. And what that means is that the amount of points you assign to an assignment will determine how important that assignment is. So if an assignment is worth 100 points, it's worth twice as much as an assignment with 50 points. The other option is to weigh assignments by category. So if we do this, we can add our categories. So let's say assessments are worth 65% of a student's grade. I'll add another grade category. Participation is worth 25%. And maybe minor assignments are worth 10%. Normally I'd call that homework, but it's kind of a weird word to use when we're in a world of remote learning, right? So I'll call it minor assignments. So how this is set up right now, if I'm weighing by category, that essentially means that if I post 10 assessments and I label them as assessments, those 10 assessments will count as 65% of the student's total grade. If I have 20 participation assignments, all 20 of those will count as a total of 25% of the student's grade, etc. We're going to weigh our assignments by category. We're just going to press save now. Okay. Now that we have our grade system set up, we're going to head into classwork. This tab is probably the tab that you're going to spend a lot of time in. This is where you're going to actually assign students work. So in this case, Ms. Aronson wants to assign students work, so she's going to click on this create button. And there are a few options for her as to what she can create. Assignment is the default assignment that you can assign. This is something where you can, well, I'm going to actually show you. Just for now, know that it's the most generic, it's the default one you're going to go to. A quiz assignment is more specific version of assignment. That's going to attach what's called a Google form. For those of you who aren't familiar with Google Forms, essentially they are the remote equivalent of a pen and paper test. So you can create a form with multiple choice questions, with short answer or long answer, and grade students on their Google form. The next option is a question. This is going to prompt students to answer either a multiple choice or a short answer question directly in Google Classroom. Next, we've got a material. Materials act the same way as assignments, which you're going to see in a minute. The one difference, though, is that materials aren't graded. So these are great as resources you want to provide students, but they're not necessarily grades. Next, we've got the option of reuse post. We don't have any assignments yet, so this is going to come up blank if I click on any of these, but essentially if I created an assignment in another classroom or maybe a month ago and I want to reuse that assignment here, I can use reuse post to do that. The last one, which I'm going to show you as well, topic, is essentially a way for a teacher to organize their classwork tab. You're going to see what that looks like though. Let's start with assignment. So I'm going to click on assignment and I'm going to give it a title. So this is assignment 1. Now you can provide instructions here. What we recommend you do is provide any expectations that you have of the student assignment here. So students know where to find them for all assignments. You can add files. Just move the window one sec. Okay, so you can add files. If you use Google Drive, you could add something from your drive. You could also add a file from your computer or even a link or a YouTube video. Now, there is no limit, just so you know, to the amount of files you add. You can have as many files as you want. Or you could create one on the fly, right, which is what we're going to do now. You can create all sorts of files. I'm going to create a doc right now. So for those of you who aren't yet familiar with Google Doc, essentially what it is, it's a word processing document, a place where students can type in text entries. So we could put whatever we want in this doc. I'm just going to set my students up. Something like that, right? Whatever we want to include in this document, we can. I'm going to give it a name, assignment 1. Okay. Now that assignment is added right here. So it could be totally blank and you ask students to respond to a prompt here, or you could populate this with information, however you want to set it up. One of the options here is how we want students to work with this document. We can have students view the file, edit the file, or we can make a copy for each student. If we have students viewing a file, they can access it and view it, but they can't edit it. If we choose students can edit file, all students can edit the same document. And if we make a copy for each student, that means if Ms. Aronson has 20 students in her class, there's going to be 20 versions of this. This is like the equivalent of making a photocopy of something and giving it to each student in the class. So I'm going to ask you folks now to take a couple of minutes and go in the chat. I want you to discuss with one another when a teacher might want to use each of these settings. So go ahead and take a minute and do that.
I'm just, as you guys are chatting in the chat, I want to answer a question that's been coming up a couple times. Many of you are asking about parent emails or student emails. So just to give you a heads up that the parent emails and the student emails need to come from the same domain. So this means if you're using your school email, which you should be if it's your Google Classroom, if it's teacher@school.com, your students are going to have student@schools.com. That same domain at the end connects the students and allows them to enter your classroom when you're adding them or inviting them. Parents, though, if you choose and you have that setting to connect your parents into your Google Classroom, your parents don't have to have a Google email. It's what happens is what your Google Classroom will do is you can send and share your students' progress with the parent through email. So what happens is that email, the parents only receive email notifications about the progress that they're doing in the classroom. They don't have access to viewing or seeing all the features the student sees in the classroom. And they don't need that student email. If you have more questions, let us know.
Thanks, Michelle. That's a great point. I also want to mention, I noticed some people joined us a little bit late. If you do have questions, be sure to enter them in the Q&A section. If you ask them in the chat, somebody might answer, but it might also get lost in the chat. All right, great. So yeah, so I saw what some of you said about how we might use these settings, and I think you folks pretty much hit the nail on the head. Students viewing a file is a great setting for any resources, right? Memos or FYIs or even like texts, right? If you want them to read an excerpt of Dracula, there's no reason for them to edit it, then make it view only. Editing a file is great for collaborative work. If you want students to work together in a document or in a slide deck or however you want to set it up, having all students work together in one file is a great way to encourage that collaboration. And then making a copy for each student, that is having each individual student submit their own assignment. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I have 30 students. I don't want to make a file for 30 students to edit. You can choose which students are accessing which assignments. So I could assign this to only 1 or 2 of my students, to 10 of my students, or to all of my students. I also can choose to assign it to multiple classes or just one class. So keep that in mind as well. Now we set up our grade system, and I want to, rehash that a second so we see why that was relevant. The grade category, because we're weighing by category, it's important for us to choose this. I want this to be an assessment. So remember, I made my assessments worth 65% of my students' grades. So this is now marked as an assessment. I could choose how many points it's worth, but that's not going to affect this because I'm weighing by category. If I weigh by point value, then this becomes important. And this becomes, this is going to factor into the way their grades are weighted. You can assign a due date and time. So if I were to, let's say, make this due on, let me just move this window one sec. If I were to make this due on Friday at 11:59 p.m. Choosing a topic, we're going to talk about that in a second. But if we want a quick and easy way to organize our classwork tab, this is a place we could do that. We also do have the ability to create rubrics and attach them to these. This is a really good resource for any kind of authentic assessment or project-based assessment that you are assigning students. You also can reuse rubrics. So if you have one standard writing rubric, for example, you could create it once and then reuse it for every writing assignment thereafter. Last thing I want to touch on is originality reports. So originality reports are a way to measure students for plagiarism, right? Determine whether or not our students are plagiarizing, and if so, where they're getting their information from. If you notice, I got a notification here that I can only enable originality reports on 3 assignments per class. Most of you will probably receive that notification as well, depending on the G Suite that your school is using. You might have access to unlimited originality reports, but that probably won't be the case for most people. So if you do have it relegated to just 3 assignments, we just recommend that you consider beforehand which assignments you want to use the originality report on, like any major research papers, anything like that, so that you know how you're going to parcel them out moving forward. All right, great. So I'm going to assign this now. Just so you know, just like posts, we can schedule this assignment to be posted, or we could just assign it now, which is what I'm going to do. So now my students immediately have access to it. So here it is. It appears in our classwork tab. And from here, I can also create a topic, which I mentioned earlier. So I might, Ms. Aronson is teaching a unit on food webs. So I might want to organize my information based on unit, right? So I'm gonna just drag and drop this assignment into this topic. I can create other topics as well. So if there's an invasive species unit, then I can move items around. I'm gonna give you another minute now to go into chat and discuss other ways you might want to organize your classwork tab other than by unit. So go ahead and take a minute and talk about that in chat. Mhm. Okay, great. So I see a lot of different ideas that are all great. Some people mentioned by type of assignment. Some people mentioned by how important the assignment is, whether it's a major assessment or a minor assessment. Some people said by subject, especially in an elementary class. Another great one is by time, right? You could do by quarter one, quarter two, or depending on how much you assign, you could even do by day or by week. But that's really going to be what you think makes most sense for your classroom. So thanks for all of that input. Okay, so let's head into the last, before I actually head into grades, I just want to mention a couple of other things. We do have a Google Calendar button we can click right here. So we're just going to look at that for a second. And we can see, hold on one sec. Let me just move this. Refresh quickly. Okay. All right, so we can see the class calendar. And if you notice, I made the assignment due at 11:59 on Friday. So it shows up on this calendar. I can look at it just by clicking and unclicking this calendar, Mrs. Aronson's class. Students also have access to this calendar, as does the teacher, which can be located right here in the Classroom tab, or even if we click this hamburger, we can access it right there. Another option right here is the class drive folder. This is where all of the files that you create for this classroom are going to be stored. Students also can access this, but only their submissions. So they're not going to get access to your original files or anything like that. All right, great. So now let's get into the final tab, which is grades, the newest tab available. So we're going to see our class roster as well as the assignments we've created. First thing I want to do is, excuse me, I want to view the student submissions. So in order to do that, there are a few ways I could do it. One way is just by clicking this vertical ellipses right here next to the grade, and I could choose View Submission. So if the student had submitted work here, I'd be able to see it and provide comments or what have you. I could also enter a grade here, or I could even just enter the grade right here, which is what I'm going to do. Now, if you notice, Michelle did very well on this assignment. She got an 100. If you notice, though, she doesn't have an overall grade. And the reason for that is because this is still in Ms. Aronson's possession. Think of it like, even though she put the grade on the assignment, it's still on her desk. The student didn't receive it back yet. So in order to return it to the student, you're going to click the vertical ellipses and actually return it to the student. Once we do that, then the student has, I can leave a comment here, right? She got 100, so great work. Return. Okay, so once I do that, the student has access to that document again, so that she can provide revisions or whatever she needs to do, whatever I assign her to do, and then she could even resubmit if that's what I'm assigning her to do. And now that we've returned it, we actually do see her overall grade now. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over now to Michelle, who's going to take us through the second half of the slide deck, and then we'll go into Q&A.
Okay, so first, I know there's a lot of questions that Mike and I are busy going through. I'm going to answer quite a few of those in a little bit, but before we do, let's review what we did go through in the Google Classroom with Al. So we went over how to create a Google Classroom by using the Google Classroom app or signing in at google.classroom.com. We also talked about the settings, going through the settings and editing, the details, the general information, and how to even set up a gradebook in the settings. We also discussed in the People's tab, you can add co-teachers, students, and you can connect students' guardians. You can also, we discussed announcements go in the stream, and you can add information to the announcements from your Google Drive, an outside link, and YouTube. We also then went into the classwork tab and talked about the variety of assignments that you can use and utilize in that tab. And you can organize them through the topics. And then finally, we talked about how teachers can grade assignments in grades. So now we're going to spend some time going through some of these questions you have. So I am going to start with, I know one I was answering right before I switched over with Al was talking about the assignments. You only have the 3 originality reports for the assignments because you have to, if you buy G Suite Enterprise or if your school has it, you have unlimited. But if you don't have that feature, it only allows you to have 3. Some other, I'm going to just start going through quite a few of these questions and answering them.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm actually going to step in for just a moment.
Go
So
for it.
just to clarify the whole parent being in classroom versus not. So when it comes to your school, having a school, kids are in kindergarten or in high school, they will all receive a Google account if you have the EDU version. Now, just because they have an email address does not mean that they actually get emails to their Gmail. That can be turned off on the back end. Parents themselves cannot receive school email addresses that get them into classroom to participate as a student. However, you have the option of giving parents what they call guardian emails if it's turned on in your Google admin console. Sometimes that is turned off. What that looks like is that in your People's tab, you're able to put in a parent email address next to the student name. So for example, if the student email address is michelle@school.com and her parent mary@hotmail.com wants to receive the guardian emails, that email would be put in, and it has to be done manually. Now, parents do have the option of choosing how often they want those emails, but I will warn you that those emails are retroactive, meaning you get them at the end of the week typically. How does that impact you as an educator? Well, if you ask your students or tell your students that on Monday you're going to have a quiz on Thursday, parents may get that email on Friday and say, well, you never told me. So sometimes it does create larger problems when parents are being notified at the end of the week. But what happens is that they get a summary of everything that was posted, and they also get a summary of all the things their students did not turn in. Why is that important? Well, if you just push stuff out to your students, for example, you want to make them a copy of a handout, but they're not turning anything in, you may see that it's not turned in, or the parents will see that. Now all of a sudden you're getting a bunch of emails that say, Michelle didn't turn this in. She told me she didn't. Now she's telling me she doesn't have to turn it in. So sometimes when parents are getting those emails, it creates a larger confusion. What I would recommend is to encourage your parents, if you want to see what's going on in classroom, have your student log in and show them around. Otherwise, consider just sending out emails, mass emails to your parents in whatever system your school uses, whether it be email or some other notification system. So I just wanted to clarify that parent piece, that they can't be a student in the classroom, but they can see what's going on if they're added as guardians.
So that's actually a great, because I actually wanted to go into younger students in the I know there were several questions about preschool or younger grades. So those younger grades, they may not have a school email already. So that's a great opportunity to add that guardian email. And yes, Google Classroom may not be the best, may not be an area where they're doing a lot of work on it, but it can be a place where you're giving information to the parents for the students to work on, and even still allow some of that collaboration on a lower level geared towards that preschool, kindergarten, or grade 1 learners, if you choose so.
Yeah, that's both of you made really good points, and I just want to show quickly where we would see that feature available for teachers to invite guardians. On this on this sign-in, we do have it enabled, so I would just click Invite Guardians right here. If you don't have it enabled, you would not see this Invite Guardians option. Okay.
Another point too is that if I put in an email, a guardian email for Michelle, and in my school this is turned on, that email address, that parent email address will stay attached to Michelle. So if I teach science, somebody teaches social studies, that email will also show up in there, which is really nice. So you don't have to do it for every single one of your classes. We're getting a lot of questions about the archiving of classrooms. Could you go back to that landing page and just show them how to archive classes rather than delete? You're muted, just for the record.
Thank you. All right, so if we want to archive a class, what we're going to do is we're just going to go back to that landing page by clicking the hamburger and going back to our landing page. And then if we just click this vertical ellipses right here, it's going to give me the option to archive a class, which is not the same as deleting. It's essentially like saying, we're not going to be using this class anymore. It's just there for records. I wanted to address another question that I saw. How can students submit photos for assignments? So the answer to that's a really good question, which is probably going to be something that's relevant to a lot of teachers. And the answer is that on an assignment, a student can attach any kind of file they want. They don't have to only work in the assignments that teachers are attaching to the assignment. So a student could attach a photo to the assignment and then submit that. So that's absolutely an option available for you.
Okay, so I want to bring up, I saw a couple questions about the differentiation, especially if you are a special education teacher or if you work with students individually. So if you are a special education teacher and you actually push in and co-teach in a general education classroom, what can happen, and Al, I don't know if you want to follow along with me in the people section of the class, your teacher, the general ed teacher, can connect you into the classroom as a teacher. So in this one we have Mrs. Aronson as one teacher, and then we have Lainey Gordon as another. So Emily Aronson can be the regular general ed teacher, and if and then Miss Gordon is the special ed teacher, then the special ed teacher can go and start assigning work particular or giving information and posting information just for that student or the couple of students to meet the goals that they're trying to work with and accommodate them. So a few other things that I'm seeing a lot of questions about now, besides adding that co-teacher, the co-teacher can publish material on the page. So you do have to invite them. They have to go in and accept the invitation in their school email. And once they are accepted and they're in there, the co-teacher can manually put in that work for you to view.
I'm gonna answer this question. So one of the questions asked that, do students have to be in the classroom before assignments are assigned? And let's say, for example, you get a student halfway through the year, do you have to then all assign that work to the student? The answer is, once you get your work in there and a student joins, they will get copies of everything that you have posted. So what does that mean? If you wanted to start setting up one of your classrooms and start posting assignments, when you start adding students, they will have access to those assignments. If you've been posting stuff all year and then all of a sudden you get a new student into your classroom and you add them, they will have access to all of those assignments. Everything that you have made a copy for each student, that copy will be made. The reason is that they get a Google Drive folder within their own personal Google Drive. And all of that content gets copied over as if you were to take a photocopy, a physical photocopy, and give it to that student.
A few other questions I see about collaboration. So if you would like students to collaborate in a document together, you have the option when they do a few things. So one, if you would like to assign it as a group presentation or something they're working on, you can come up with a specific document that only members of that group can edit by changing in the side who you're assigning it to. So for example, if I was to assign a project just for Al and Mike to work on, I would, in that assignment, I would go into the settings and click on, as I'm creating it on the right-hand side, there's who you're assigning it to. I would click on adding it just for Mike, just for Al, and then that way they both have access to the document I'm sharing with them for them to collaborate in, so other students don't have access to that. Some of you are asking about other ways of the collaboration and edit right. Can you see who's editing? If you go into the edit history, you can see whoever made changes to the document, and you can also restore the document to any previous version if you need it. Also, in the assignments tab, if you, to answer the question about making copies for students when creating an assignment, so the students don't see all the copies. You get to see all the copies as a teacher. The student only sees the copy of the assignment that's assigned to them. So if you have 20 students, you want them to each have a copy of the document you have created. That student will only see that they have that one document. They won't see that you created 20 individual documents. Some others are talking about, I just want, Mike, you may be able to answer this. Is there a limit of the number of students or co-teachers you can add to a classroom?
No, so you can fit as many teachers as you want. So when I was teaching in the classroom, we had a PLC group made. So we actually had I think there was about 20 of us or so as teachers. And then we had some other teachers as students. We were just a PLC facilitator, so it made sense to have all of us in there. So you will be able to get all your students in there. One question I did see earlier is, does it make sense to have a full school classroom? I would urge you to kind of consider what the purpose would be. The reason I would say that is, if you have all of your students in there, are you just posting out announcements? And if so, is there another way that you can do that? For example, filming yourself, if you're giving school announcements, filming yourself giving the announcements and then posting the link and emailing it home. Or if you have a school information system that you use, things like Remind 101, are there just better tools that are that might be able to facilitate that? If you're looking to kind of keep your classroom community smaller, then I definitely recommend just keeping it to your classes. Now, to the students that you teach. Now, one thing I would recommend, I taught 150 students when I was teaching, but I had 5 classes where I taught all of the same thing. I did actually create a classroom individually for each, even though a lot of the content was the same. The reason was it was just a lot easier for me to manage because I had my physical grade book. Instead of having to scroll through and then find alphabetically, it was just easier to kind of keep all of that closer knit, as well as my students were able to ask each other questions on the stream tab when I wasn't able to answer them. So it just keeps that classroom community a little bit closer.
Thanks, Mike. I want to address a question from Marion Whitaker. I teach preschool. I put parents' emails under the people section because they will be the ones reading them. This will work, correct? So the answer is yes, and that's what would make sense to me. That's probably how I would set it up too. I would just recommend that you confirm with your district about policies with privacy and that sort of thing to make sure that you're conforming to school policy. But other than that, yeah, I would set it up the same
I just want to, Al, one more time, if you can go to the hamburger next to the teacher, I just want to show how to control the notifications. There was someone asking about they don't want to be overwhelmed with emails. If you go to that side, you hit settings where Al is showing you on the screen right now. If you click on that, here you can control your email notifications. You can completely turn all of them off, or you can pick and choose which email notifications you would like. If you would like to receive them only for posts or for emails or submission of work, you can change and edit how you would like that. Al, could you show how to unarchive a class quickly as well in classes?
Sure. Okay, so if I were to archive a class, okay, so we're going to archive that. Just move this window. Okay, and then this is in the way. Sorry, that's in the way for some reason. Where is it actually? I thought it was down here. Michelle, do you know where it is?
Click on your 3 lines on the top left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go to your
Oh, perfect. Thank you. There we go. So now we can view the archived classes. We click here and then we just restore.
Just for everybody to know, I am posting a resource in the chat that is getting started with Google. Google put it out, so we're obviously not gonna be able to get to all of your questions. We're really trying, but we do apologize. But I am gonna post that there for you too, that when you sit down to actually start building your classrooms, and as you run into these little snags, you can definitely refer to that resource as well.
Just to answer again, there's a lot of you who seem to be, so first Mike did talk about that you have, if you teach multiple classes, you do get multiple different class codes because if that student is in only, so for example, if you're a social studies teacher and you teach 5 sections of social studies, but they're all different topics, you get different class codes, and each code will be specific for that class, and that student won't see that you have other classes in Google Classroom. They will see the other classes they are in, they won't see yours. I do want to talk about specifically the younger grades though. A lot of you seem a little concerned with pre-K, K1, 2, 3 students. Google Classroom can be used for them. You also have to think that any platform or online learning platform you are using for younger grades, you're going to need a lot of that parental support. So you will want to consider connecting guardians and parents to the Google Classroom. For a little of the older grades, like 2, 3, you may want to utilize more of the stream as the page for them to access the information that you're trying to get across them. So if you're trying to share a worksheet with them, that's a great place. Also with the younger grades, remember, the fewer clicks, the better. So if you are deciding to share with those pre-K through K, 2nd grade, 3rd grade students, something that you would like them to do or work on, consider the stream so they have one place to find all their information, and also consider having them only post once a day or supplying them with a list of activities and that to do separately, and then having that uploaded to your Google Classroom.
Now, we are about out of time, but I just want to answer one question really quickly, that if you were in Microsoft School before going into Google, if you upload your Microsoft documents or your PowerPoints into your Drive, it will upload as a PowerPoint or a Word document, but when you open it, it will transfer it and convert it to a Google Doc or a Google Slides. Now, in Drive, there are settings that you can change so that it does that automatically. We're not going to cover that in the scope of this workshop in particular, or this webinar in particular, but if you were to just upload into your Drive and then click it and open it, it will convert it.
So I know a lot of you have questions about Google, the functionalities, even more outside of Google Classroom. So Eduscape, we do offer a e-learning course on Google that goes through the different G Suite features. If you're interested in knowing more about G Suite, the G Suite features and getting started with Google a little bit more, not just Google Classroom, again, we do offer that e-learning, and you can find out more information by emailing info@eduscape.com. We have about a couple more minutes before we do wrap up, so I am going to try and answer a few more of your questions about that's in that question tab before we get going. Some of you are asking about Zoom versus Google Meet and Google Hangout. They're all different video chatting software programs. There is no you need to choose which one's going to work best for you and your platform and what you're trying to do with students. We choose Zoom for different reasons when we are using them for these webinars. A great feature that we are liking is that it records. So we're able to record the entire presentation when we're done, and that's how we're able to then send it back out to you. We are out of time though now, so we are here from you. Please email us if you have any questions at info@Eduscape. Also go to our website or event page to find out for more upcoming webinars or information. Thank you all for joining us today. I apologize for questions we haven't answered. Hopefully Mike's resource that he shared with you is going to be a great help. Again, thank you for joining us.
And I also just want to mention really quickly that we do also offer an e-learning course on getting started with Google in the classroom. It delves into all sorts of different parts of the G Suite for Education. So if you go to eduscape.com, check it out if you're interested in learning more. Thank you.